She called me just the babysitter. The words came out so casually, so sharp, like she was commenting on the weather. But those 5 words cut deeper than any knife ever could. My own daughter-in-law, the mother of the very children I had rocked to sleep, fed with trembling hands, held through sickness and nightmares, dismissed me in front of her friends as nothing more than just the babysitter. I froze when I heard it. I was standing in the kitchen, wiping down the counter after making dinner for the kids. They had already run off to play in the living room, their laughter bouncing off the walls, the kind of pure joy only children can bring. Her friends were sitting at the dining table, sipping on their fancy coffee drinks, laughing about their careers, their travels, their glamorous lives. And then one of them asked, "So who helps you out with the kids when you're busy?" That's when she said it. "Oh, that's just the babysitter. She's here most of the time." She didn't look at me. She didn't even acknowledge me. She waved her hand in my direction like I was a shadow in the room. My heart stopped. Babysitter? I raised those children. When my son and his wife couldn't afford daycare, I stepped in. When the kids were sick, I was the one who stayed up all night, cool washcloths on their foreheads, whispering lullabies the way I once did for their father. I packed their lunches, walked them to school, cheered the loudest at their plays. Babysitter? No. I was their grandmother. I was their second mother. But in that moment, to her, I was just the help, disposable, invisible. I tried to laugh it off, to pretend it didn't sting. I busied myself with dishes, hoping no one saw the tears welling in my eyes. But her friends laughed politely, like they understood, like I really was nothing more than some old woman paid by the hour. My chest tightened. I wanted to scream, to shout out that I had given everything for this family. Instead, I swallowed my pain and kept scrubbing the same plate over and over until my hands shook. Later that night, when everyone had left, I sat at the kitchen table alone. The kids were tucked into bed, and the house was quiet. My son was working late, and she was scrolling through her phone on the couch, not even looking my way. I wanted to ask her why. Why would she belittle me like that? Why erase everything I had done for her and the children? But the words got stuck in my throat. Instead, I thought back to all the years that led to this moment. I remembered when my son called me after their first child was born. He was panicked, exhausted, overwhelmed. "Mom, we don't know what we're doing. Can you come?" I dropped everything, packed a bag, and moved into their house for weeks. I cooked, cleaned, cared for the baby while they slept. I was the one who showed her how to swaddle, how to soothe colic, how to survive those endless nights of crying. She used to thank me. She used to say she couldn't do it without me. Then came the second child. My son was working 2 jobs by then, and she was constantly exhausted. I stepped in again. I became the safety net, the steady pair of hands that never wavered. Diapers, bottles, fevers, tantrums. I handled it all. I told myself I was doing it out of love, because family helps family. And I believed that one day, when the kids were older, when the chaos settled, they'd see me for what I truly was, the backbone of this household. But now, babysitter. The word echoed in my mind like a cruel joke. Did she really believe that? Or worse, did my son see me that way too? The thought made my stomach churn. I stayed awake until midnight, waiting for my son to come home. When he finally walked in, tired and loosened his tie, I couldn't hold it in any longer. "Do you know what she called me? Tonight?" I asked, my voice trembling. He looked concerned. "What happened?" "She told her friends I'm just the babysitter," I whispered. His eyes widened for a second, then softened with pity. "Mom, I'm sure she didn't mean it like that." "Like what then?" I snapped. "How else could she mean it?" He rubbed his temples, sighed. "You know how she is. Sometimes she says things without thinking. Don't take it personally. Don't take it personally." How could I not? Those children were my life. I gave up my own retirement dreams, the little peace I had earned after decades of hard work, to be there for them. My friends traveled the world, joined clubs, lived freely. And me? I spent my days chasing toddlers, scrubbing stains out of clothes, cooking meals that went unthanked. Babysitter. That night, lying in bed, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing her voice, kept seeing her dismissive wave of the hand. I felt small, insignificant, used, and something inside me shifted. For the first time, I wondered if I had made a mistake. Had I given too much? Had I allowed them to take advantage of me? I thought of my late husband, how he used to warn me. "Don't give them everything, Margaret," he would say. "They'll never learn to stand on their own." But I didn't listen. I thought I was doing what any good mother, any good grandmother, would do. Now I wasn't so sure. The next morning, when the children hugged me tight and begged me to play, I smiled for them. But inside, a seed of resentment had been planted, one that I knew would only grow. And I had no idea that being called just the babysitter was only the beginning of what would unravel. The days after that comment felt different. I went about my usual routine, packing school lunches, walking the kids to the bus stop, folding laundry, cooking dinner, but there was a heaviness in everything I did. The words wouldn't leave me alone. Babysitter. It replayed in my head like a cruel chorus, every syllable reminding me of how small she saw me. I tried to push it aside, to focus on the children because they were my joy. When they ran into my arms after school, when they whispered secrets into my ear, when they reached for me during thunderstorms, those were the moments that gave me life. They didn't see me as a babysitter. To them, I was grandma. Safe, warm, always there. But the shadow of my daughter-in-law's words hung over me like a storm cloud. A few days later, she had another gathering with her friends. This time, I told myself I'd stay out of sight. I retreated to my room upstairs, letting them chatter and laugh without me. But I could still hear their voices drifting through the house. And then I heard her again. "She's here all the time," she said, her tone light, almost dismissive. "It's like, we don't even have to think about childcare. It's convenient." Convenient. That was the word she used. Not grateful, not blessed. Convenient. I gripped the edge of my bed, my nails digging into the quilt I had sewn with my own hands years ago. My chest tightened. Convenient. Was that all I was to her? A service? A solution? I had become a line item in her life, like a grocery delivery or a cleaning lady. Later that evening, after her friends left, I tried to approach her. I found her in the living room, scrolling on her phone, her legs stretched across the couch I had helped pick out. My heart was pounding, but I forced myself to speak. "Can I talk to you for a moment?" I asked. She looked up, mildly annoyed, as though I had interrupted something more important. "Sure," she said, her voice flat. "I heard what you said earlier," I began, my throat tight, "about me being convenient." She raised an eyebrow. "Well, aren't you? I mean, you're always here, and it helps us a lot." "It's more than helping," I said, my voice trembling. "I've given everything for those kids. I've put my whole life on hold. I'm not just some babysitter you hired." She shrugged. "I never said you were hired. But let's be honest, Margaret, you are kind of like a babysitter. You take care of them when we're not around. That's what babysitters do." I felt my face burn, a mix of anger and humiliation. "I'm their grandmother," I snapped. "Yes, and I appreciate that," she said, in a tone that clearly meant the opposite. "But sometimes you act like they're yours. They're my children, not yours. Don't forget that." Her words pierced me straight through the heart. My children, not yours. I couldn't breathe for a moment. After everything I had done, after all the sacrifices, she wanted to remind me of my place, on the outside. That night, I cried myself to sleep. I hadn't done that in years. My pillow was damp by morning, and when I looked at myself in the mirror, I barely recognized the woman staring back. Puffy eyes, deep lines, shoulders slumped under the weight of years of giving without thanks. I thought about leaving, packing my bags, walking out the door, letting them fend for themselves. But then I thought of the children, their sweet faces, their little voices calling, "Grandma." I couldn't abandon them. They didn't deserve this tension, this bitterness. They loved me unconditionally, and I loved them the same. But I also knew something had to change. The turning point came one Saturday morning. I had taken the kids to the park while their parents went out. We were sitting on a bench, eating ice cream, when the youngest looked up at me and said, "Grandma, you're the best. Mommy doesn't play with us like you do." I smiled, but inside, my heart broke a little more. These children were starving for attention, for presence. And while I gave them everything, their own mother seemed to give them scraps. That evening, when we got home, I overheard her arguing with my son. Her voice was sharp, accusing. "She undermines me. She makes the kids love her more than me. It's like she thinks she's their real mom." I froze in the hallway, clutching the railing. My son's voice was quieter, weary. "She's just helping, Valerie. You know we couldn't do this without her." "She's suffocating us," she snapped. "I feel like I can't breathe in my own house. Either she understands her place or this is going to get ugly." Her place. Babysitter. Convenient. The words swirled in my head like poison. I realized then that no matter how much love I gave, no matter how many sacrifices I made, to her, I would never be enough. I would always be something to control, to dismiss, to belittle. And that's when I made a quiet decision. I wouldn't explode. I wouldn't confront her with anger. But I would no longer be taken for granted. I would find a way to reclaim my dignity, even if it meant pulling back, even if it broke my heart. Because I wasn't just the babysitter. And one day, they were all going to realize exactly what I had been to them and what they lost when they pushed me aside. The days that followed were a test of my resolve. I began pulling back, slowly, carefully, like a tide retreating from the shore. I no longer jumped at every request. When my daughter-in-law asked me to pick up groceries on my way home, I smiled politely and said, "I don't think I'll have time today." When she asked me to stay late because she had dinner plans, I replied, "I already have an evening planned for myself." Her eyes would narrow, her lips tightening into that thin line she always made when things didn't go her way. She wasn't used to hearing no from me, but I realized I had been teaching her, all these years, to take me for granted, because I never set boundaries. It wasn't easy. Every fiber of me wanted to step in, to smooth things over, to keep the peace, but I had to remind myself, love does not mean erasing yourself. The children noticed the change first. "Grandma, why aren't you staying for bedtime?" they asked one night as I gathered my purse. I knelt down, brushing their hair back tenderly. "I'll still be here. Oh, my loves. But Grandma needs time for herself, too." Their faces fell, and my heart nearly cracked. But I knew this was necessary, for me and for them. They had to see that love wasn't just about giving endlessly. It was also about respect. My daughter-in-law, however, didn't take it so well. One evening, after I'd declined to cook dinner, she cornered me in the kitchen. "Is something wrong?" she demanded, her tone laced with suspicion. "No," I replied evenly. "I've just realized I need to balance my life a little more. I've been doing too much." Her eyes flashed. "Doing too much? We rely on you. You can't just pull away whenever you feel like it." "I'm not pulling away," I said softly. "I'm just setting limits. I'm their grandmother, Valerie, not the babysitter." The silence that followed was deafening. For the first time, she had no snappy retort. She simply stared at me, her face tight, before storming out of the room. That night, I lay awake replaying the confrontation in my mind. I wasn't sure how my son would react when she told him, but deep inside, a spark of strength had been lit in me. I had spoken my truth, and then something unexpected happened. A few days later, I received a letter. Not a text, not an email, but a handwritten letter addressed to me. The handwriting was unfamiliar, but the return address was the courthouse downtown. Confused, I opened it, and nearly dropped the paper as I read. It was a summons. I was being called as a witness in a custody-related matter involving my own grandchildren. My hands trembled as I clutched the letter. Custody? What was happening? I confronted my son that evening, the letter clutched in my hand. "Why am I being called to court?" His face went pale. He rubbed the back of his neck, avoiding my eyes. "Mom, I didn't want to drag you into this, but things between Valerie and me, they're bad. She's threatening divorce, and she's trying to argue that you've interfered too much with the kids." My knees nearly gave out. I sank into a chair, staring at him in disbelief. Interfered? I raised those children while she was busy living her life. I gave them everything, and now she's using that against me? He nodded grimly. "She wants to paint it as though you've overstepped, that you've tried to replace her. She thinks it'll help her case." Tears filled my eyes. I only ever wanted to help, to love them, to give them stability. "I know, Mom," he said, his voice breaking. "But in court, the truth isn't always enough. You'll have to be careful with what you say." That night, I sat in my room, staring at the summons on my nightstand. My chest felt hollow. I had never asked for this war, but somehow, I had been drafted into it. The day of the hearing came quickly. I wore my best dress, the one my late husband always said made me look graceful. My hands shook as I clutched my purse, walking into the courthouse. The air was thick with tension, the kind that makes your stomach twist into knots. And then, as I stepped into the courtroom, I saw him, the judge, His face went pale, his eyes locking onto me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Shock? Recognition? For a moment, the entire room seemed to freeze. Lawyers shuffled papers. Valerie whispered angrily to her attorney. My son sat rigid in his chair. But the judge was frozen, his gaze fixed on me like I was a ghost from his past. And in that instant, I realized something no one else in the room knew. The judge knew me. Not as Margaret, the grandmother. Not as the woman dismissed as just the babysitter. He knew me from a past I had carefully kept hidden. A past that, if revealed, would change everything. The air inside the courtroom thickened, as if the walls themselves had absorbed the tension and were pressing it back into the room. My son sat at the defendant's table, shoulders squared but jaw tight, while Valerie Pearl saw her, chid across from him like a cat ready to pounce. But none of that mattered in that moment. What mattered was the way the judge was looking at me. I hadn't seen that face in nearly 4 decades. Time had weathered it. Deep creases now lined his forehead, and his once dark hair had turned to silver. But the eyes, those sharp steel blue eyes, hadn't changed. They were the same eyes that once stared across a table at me when I was just 23, young, scared, and fighting for my life in a very different kind of courtroom. My throat tightened, memories rushing back like floodwaters. I forced myself to look away, to steady my breath. No one here knew about that chapter of my life. Not my son, not my grandchildren, not even my late husband. I had buried it so deep that sometimes I almost believed it had belonged to someone else. But now, here it was, clawing its way back into the present. All rise, the bailiff announced. Though the judge's eyes had barely shifted from me, everyone stood, chairs scraping the floor, but my knees felt locked in place. Please be seated, he said finally, his voice catching just slightly before he regained his composure. The proceedings began like any other custody hearing. Petitions filed, attorneys making opening remarks, accusations flying between my son and Valerie like poisoned darts. She painted herself as the devoted mother, unfairly burdened by an overbearing grandmother who, in her words, overstepped her role. My son defended me, but his words sounded strained, desperate. And through it all, the judge kept glancing at me. Small, fleeting looks, but sharp enough that I felt each one like a needle piercing my skin. When the bailiff finally called my name, my heart thudded so hard I thought it might crack a rib. I rose, my legs trembling, and walked slowly to the witness stand. The wood felt cold beneath my palm as I swore the oath. State your full name for the record, the clerk said. Margaret Ann Collins, I replied, my voice steady though my hands shook. I sat down, trying not to let my eyes drift toward the judge, but I could feel him watching me, even when he pretended to scan the papers before him. Valerie's lawyer approached first. She was a sharp young woman in a navy suit, her voice smooth as silk but laced with poison. Mrs. Collins, you've been very involved in your grandchildren's lives, haven't you? Yes, I said. I've cared for them since they were babies. More than cared, wouldn't you say? You practically raised them. Would you agree? I hesitated, choosing my words carefully. I stepped in where I was needed. I never tried to replace their mother. Her lips curled into a faint smile. And yet, you fed them, clothed them, put them to bed, picked them up from school. You even attended parent-teacher meetings. Does that sound like just a grandmother to you? My chest burned. It sounds like someone who loves her family, she smirked, as if she'd drawn blood, or someone who couldn't let go of control. I clenched my fists in my lap, resisting the urge to snap back. I glanced at my son. His face was tight, his hands gripping the table. Then Valerie's lawyer asked a question I hadn't expected. Mrs. Collins, have you ever had experience in court before? The room tilted. My pulse roared in my ears. I forced myself to breathe, to keep my face composed. No, I said quietly. But when I dared to look up, the judge's eyes were on me again. He knew. He remembered. Her lawyer didn't press further, moving on to questions about my finances and living arrangements, but I barely heard her. My mind was in the past, in that other courtroom, with that same man sitting higher than me, holding the gavel that decided my fate. When my son's attorney finally cross-examined me, his voice was gentler, kinder. He asked about the countless times I'd comforted the children, how I'd provided stability when their parents were busy, how I had sacrificed my own life for theirs. I answered honestly, my throat thick with emotion. Would you say your involvement has harmed them in any way? he asked. I shook my head. No, I love them. They know that. I've only ever wanted them to feel safe. And for a moment, my voice cracked. I couldn't stop the tears from welling in my eyes. The judge shifted in his chair, his expression flickering. When I stepped down from the stand, I avoided his gaze, but inside, I was unraveling. As the hearing adjourned for the day, I moved quickly toward the exit, wanting only to escape the suffocating air of the courtroom. But as I reached the heavy wooden doors, I heard a voice behind me. Mrs. Collins. I froze. It wasn't the bailiff. It wasn't one of the lawyers. It was him, the judge. I turned slowly, my heart in my throat. He stood just a few feet away, his robe billowing slightly as he moved closer, his eyes locking on mine. It's been a long time, he said softly, his voice low enough that no one else could hear. I opened my mouth, but no words came. My throat was dry, my pulse hammering in my ears. Mom, don't let Valerie's lawyer get to you, he whispered. They're just trying to make you look controlling. The judge will see the truth. I forced a smile, but inside, dread churned. If Judge Whitman decided to reveal my past, the truth would come out in the most brutal way possible. And then what? Would my credibility vanish? Would I lose my grandchildren? When court reconvened, I kept my eyes fixed on the table, refusing to meet the judge's gaze. But I could feel it, those piercing blue eyes watching me, weighing me, remembering me. The attorneys argued back and forth. Valerie testified, painting me as manipulative, claiming I undermined her role as mother. She even accused me of turning the children against her. My son countered, describing my sacrifices, how I had kept the family afloat when Valerie abandoned her responsibilities. But the real storm was still brewing, silent and invisible, in the tension between me and the man on the bench. At one point, during a recess, Valerie leaned close to her lawyer and whispered, too loudly for her own good, "Why does the judge keep staring at her? What's going on?" My blood ran cold. If Valerie sensed something, she wouldn't let it go. She was a predator who thrived on weakness. That evening, I found myself standing outside the courthouse long after most people had gone. The cool night air bit at my skin, but I barely noticed. My legs moved on their own, carrying me toward the side entrance where the judge's chambers were located. I told myself I wouldn't go. I told myself I could walk away, keep the past locked away where it belonged. But when I saw him step out, his robe gone and his suit jacket slung over his arm, I froze in place. "Margaret," he said softly, almost like an old friend greeting someone after years apart. "Don't," I warned, my voice sharp. "Don't say my name like that." He sighed, running a hand through his silver hair. "I didn't mean to rattle you today, but when I saw you walk into that courtroom," he shook his head. "It was like seeing a ghost. I'm not that girl anymore," I snapped. "That life is over, is it?" he asked quietly. "Because from where I sit, it seems like the choices you made back then are still haunting you." I turned to leave, but he stepped closer. "I never forgot you, Margaret. Not after everything that happened, not after the verdict. Do you know how many times I wondered if I made the right call?" I stopped cold, my breath caught in my throat. "You think I don't remember?" he said, his voice breaking ever so slightly. "I remember every detail. I remember the evidence, the testimony, the lies they told about you. I remember your face when I read the verdict, and I remember the relief and the fear in your eyes when you walked out of that courtroom." Tears stung my eyes, unbidden. "Why are you saying this now? Why bring it up after all these years?" "Because," he said firmly, "if your past is dragged into this case, I need to know how far you're willing to go to protect your secret, and more importantly, how far I'm willing to go to protect you." His words left me reeling. Protect me? After all this time, after all the silence? Why would he still care? Before I could answer, footsteps echoed down the steps behind us. Valerie's voice cut through the night. "Well, isn't this interesting?" Valerie's smirk was enough to make my heart plummet into my stomach. She stood there on the courthouse steps, arms folded, her eyes darting between me and Judge Whitman with predatory glee. "Well, well," she said, her voice dripping with venom. "I was wondering why the judge seemed so interested in you. Now it all makes sense." I stiffened. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Oh, don't I?" she snapped. "Because from where I'm standing it looks like that Honorable Judge Whitman and my dear mother-in-law are hiding something." She turned her attention to him, her expression sly. "What is it, Judge? A little secret from the past? Something that could What's the word? Compromise your impartiality? Her words sliced through the night like a blade. Judge Whitman's face remained impassive, but I saw the slight twitch in his jaw, the faint shift of his stance. He wasn't immune to her insinuations. "You should be careful, Mrs. Collins," he said in that firm, controlled tone only a man of the bench could muster. "Speculation has a way of backfiring." Valerie laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. "Oh, please, don't try to intimidate me. You two are hiding something, and I'll find out what it is. And when I do," she leaned in, her eyes glittering with malice, "it'll be the end of your custody case, and maybe your reputation too." She spun on her heel and disappeared into the night, her heels clicking like gunshots against the pavement. The silence she left behind was suffocating. My hands trembled. "This is a disaster," I whispered. "She's going to dig until she finds something, and she's ruthless enough to use anything against me." Judge Whitman placed a steadying hand on the railing. "Margaret, listen to me. Valerie's threats are empty unless she has proof, and the past, your past, was sealed. No one can touch it." "No one except you," I shot back, my voice breaking. "You could expose everything with a single word." His gaze softened. "And what would that accomplish? You've built a life, a family. Why would I destroy that? Because judges care about the law, not about people." I spat bitterly. His eyes darkened. "Don't confuse me with the system, Margaret. That night, all those years ago, I made a choice, and I've lived with it ever since. You walked free because of me. Do you understand that?" I swallowed hard, emotions warring inside me. Gratitude, fear, resentment, confusion. "And now?" I whispered. "What happens now?" "Now," he said firmly, "you fight for your family. And if Valerie tries to use me to undermine you, I'll shut it down." His words were strong, but the doubt gnawed at me. Could I really trust him? Or was I setting myself up for a fall I'd never recover from? The next day in court, the air was electric. Valerie's lawyer seemed unusually confident, his smirk smug as he shuffled his papers. My pulse quickened. Had Valerie already told him something? As testimony resumed, Valerie's eyes never left me. She wasn't just playing defense anymore, she was hunting. Every answer I gave, every glance I stole toward the judge, seemed to fuel her. At one point her lawyer stood and asked, "Mrs. Collins, would you say you've always been completely forthcoming about your past?" The question hit me like a brick. My son's head snapped toward me, his brow furrowed in confusion. "Yes," I managed, my voice steady. "I've always been honest where it matters." "Where it matters," the lawyer repeated, drawing out the words like a challenge. He turned slightly toward the judge. "Interesting." Judge Whitman's gavel struck the sound block sharply. "Move on, counselor." The lawyer raised his hands in mock surrender. "Of course, Your Honor," but his grin said otherwise. When court adjourned, my son caught up to me in the hallway. "Mom, what was that about? Why did he ask about your past?" I forced a smile, though my insides felt like ice. "It's just a tactic, sweetheart. Don't worry." But his worried eyes lingered on me longer than I could bear. That night, as I prepared dinner alone, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number lit the screen. "Do you want your son to know the truth? Meet me tomorrow, same place you spoke to the judge." My breath caught. Valerie. It had to be. She wasn't bluffing. She had something, or at least she thought she did. And suddenly, I realized the nightmare wasn't just about losing custody. It was about losing everything. My son's trust, my grandchildren's love, the life I had built on the fragile foundation of a secret I thought was buried forever. The following evening, I stood once again by the courthouse steps, the shadows long and the air heavy with unease. Valerie emerged from the darkness like a cat who had cornered its prey. "I knew you'd come," she purred. "Mothers like you always do." I crossed my arms tightly. "What do you want?" Her smile widened. "Leverage, and you're going to give it to me." She pulled out her phone and tapped the screen. A scanned document appeared. Yellowed paper with official seals, lines of text that made my blood run cold. She had my old court records. "This," she said, holding the phone just out of reach, "is your past, your dirty little secret. One word from me, and your son will know exactly who you really are. The judge will be discredited, and your case will crumble. But there's a way out." I swallowed hard. "What way?" "Drop your custody petition. Walk away. Leave the children with us. and I'll make sure this little piece of history never sees the light of day." Her smile was wicked. "So what's it going to be, Margaret? Your grandchildren or your secret?"